My speech in three, two, one. Chair, there's a lot of coverage that really giving unfair responsibility towards women. There's a lot of uh, gender stereotyping that been pushed by this coverage, such as how Angel Markella, for example, are some sort of brilliant leader, not because their own merit, but because they are because they are a female leader that make her somehow much more accepting toward science and so forth. I'll explain to you why this is not only not true, but pushing towards harmful narrative. I'll explain three things in this debate. First, why this is unjustified and why this is not in the interest of feminist movement. Second, I'll explain to you what kind of practical benefit that we want in on feminist movement. And third, by opposing this kind of narrative. And third, I'll explain to you what kind of alternative narrative that can be given towards this pandemic response. First, why this is something that unjustified. Notice that this kind of narrative are trying to given really some sort of really higher expectation towards women, right? And this is somehow are misogynistic. Because why? Because when you give much more a higher expectation towards female leader, for example, people will give much more responsibility towards women in general. For example, they will give that, oh, because women are much more open towards science, we can giving those kind of women different tasks, different tasks, and because they are because they are women, they are seen as more capable and so on and so forth. I think this is something that really harmful towards women in it at itself, because this kind of higher expectation will uh, will lead to much more responsibility that will lead to much more disappointment. Because why? Because women and men are inherently same in general, or capable on those kind of things. And even if that means we have to give out much more power, because this kind of narrative may be giving much more power towards women, but I think in the long term it's still more beneficial towards us, towards feminist movement, that pushing for equality, pushing for the same treatment towards men and women. And this kind of standard, even though it's giving much more power in the really short term, but in the long term it's still misogynistic. It's still trying to differentiate between woman and man. Second, why this is something that not in the interest of feminist movement, and why this is really giving a practical harm. I already explained to you why this is something that unjustified. And this kind of responsibility will manifest towards every kind of interaction between women to the words, right? Like first the responsibility as a whole, they will have the different treatment, they will have the different treatment towards men and women. They will uh they will trading much more, they will seen as much more power. And when we seen as have much more power, when in real life we are not, and we in real life we still have a lot of women who face misogynistic and so on and so forth, we can push those kind of narrative. We can push that the narrative that women are being oppressed by society, which is true. Okay, that women being oppressed by society, but trying to shift those kind of narrative towards an illusion of power, that women somehow much more better, just by just much more better leader just by being a virtue of woman. I think this is something that really that we really uh, as a government don't want. So what kind of alternative that we can give? We can give the alternative uh, towards shifting the narrative towards women as a leader are inherently good to the society that much more accepting and much more open toward female leadership. It's mean that they are more progressive and so on and so forth, are much more better, having much more better response towards those kind of pandemic, right? Because they are not science denial and so on and so forth. And I think this is a really good kind of alternative. Because why? Because we are first, we are, as a feminist, we are pushing the progressive narrative, because the progressive narrative come from inclusivity towards women, that women can and can being a leader too. But it doesn't mean that just being a woman, just being a woman, we have a virtue of uh, having a better a better response towards pandemic, right? It's giving much more inclusivity. It's giving much more equality towards treatment of women. Because at least when you trying to open towards people in general, towards trying towards searching what kind of leader who have much more capability by their own marriage rather than by their gender. I think this is the alternative that we really want. This is the alternative that will giving much more benefit in the long term. And maybe opposition side of the house will say that we can pass this narrative, because this narrative are the only one who can erase misogynistic things, for example, from society. But I think this is not true, because I think misogynistic is not just only come from seeing a woman as an inferior entity, but it come from giving different responsibility towards women. And I think those kind of narrative and those kind of things, it's still misogynistic, even though it's come from progressive packaging. And that's why we're really proud to propose.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister. I'm sorry for the old school clap right there. Continuing, I would like to welcome the Leader of Opposition to start your speech. Whenever you are ready, don't forget to count it down so we can begin.
Okay. Am I audible? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, 3, 2. So first and foremost, rebuttals. Now, the government said that women will be given more tasks because of higher expectation. But ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to understand that as feminists, this is beneficial because it is in line to the agenda of feminism. But that proving that women are capable, perhaps even more, sometimes even more capable than men. But ladies and gentlemen, other than talking about our goal as feminism, ladies and gentlemen, other than that, there's no explanation why this narrative can happen. Sure, you might say that, well, the reporter said, even though it's biased, the reporter said that they do good jobs, and therefore people will expect more good jobs. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to understand that the only expected results for women in position, or even for any other people, for men in position, in this case, women-led country, they are expected to lead, ladies and gentlemen. And as these reporting stated, that they are actually leading this country, not because they are a woman, but because they are doing their job. So by saying that there's going to be a higher expectation, ladies and gentlemen, there's no circumstances that can actually lead a more higher expectation, because the expectation that they're always going to have is only leading their own country. So, ladies and gentlemen, our stance is that we don't oppose such coverage because of current restrictive times, ladies and gentlemen. We could use this moment to actually spread peaceful influence and influence of feminism itself. No, thank you for the VOI. So we have 3 arguments. First, PR that benefit feminism and spread of peace, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as feminists, one of our current goal is actually to spread the belief that women can be strong, competent, and independent. Now, true to our words, these coverage are benefiting us to fulfill our goals as feminists. That is, fulfilling the goal that there can be women in vital or strategic positions as leaders or influencers that can actually do their job and do a very good job, perhaps even better. Now, what this shows is that we are only spreading our PR that benefits our own agenda as feminists by saying that women can be empowered during these pandemic times. Women can be independent and can be competent during these pandemic times. For example, you can see these leaders and you can see these other people, and we are doing influencing because of the current restrictive times. We cannot really go out. We cannot no longer do rallies as freely as we can. And now what we are going to do is actually going to report that there are a woman in power and they are leading correctly. Second, is media as an outlet of information and also to not spread fear and panic. Yes, so in times of pandemic, lessening the spread of fear and panic is one of the roles of modern media. Sure, informations are important, ladies and gentlemen, such as daily or weekly or perhaps monthly reminders of the pandemic. But, ladies and gentlemen, most of the times, a lot of people, we have to understand that right now, even today, after months of pandemic, deeper into month of pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people are still paranoid about the current problems of pandemic. Still, so sure, some people are still out there, like they're working their daily jobs and with limitations, but still, ladies and gentlemen, spreading panic is already spreading because of people are still afraid of going out. Now, in times of pandemic, we as the media, ladies and gentlemen, as a modern media, we have to be an out. We have to use the modern media as an outlet to actually lessen the fear and panic of that is the role of us. We have to lessen the threat of fear and panic of the people, ladies and gentlemen, and we can lessen those fear and panic through our spread of information that women-led countries are actually able to be stable, or sometimes even more stable, ladies and gentlemen. And so those information can actually lead to people being satisfied that there are actually hope that there are actually hope that in these distraught times, in these times where there's a pandemic and where people are limited to their actions, restricted by their own houses, ladies and gentlemen, that there's always a hope that there's going to be stable times in the future, ladies and gentlemen. Now, my third argument that is that even if the reporting is biased, even if by saying that there are leaders who do this, who do amazing things, but ladies and gentlemen, what being reported is still true. Sure, these countries are still stable, ladies and gentlemen, and have a or some woman in position of power. So the news itself is not the hoax nor false, as they are true that there are women in strategic position, there are women in power to actually able to actually able manifest their own influence through their positions. And from that, they are actually in power in a stable country in the current pandemic era. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have to understand that these, even though it may be biased, even though by saying that there may be some information that are overreacting, but at the end of the day, the information in and of itself is still true to what is really actually happening. There is woman in position and they are doing their job, they are doing their responsibility, not just as a woman, not just as people, but as leaders. And by doing their responsibility, they can make the country stable. By doing their job, they can actually make a lot of people's life that is they are responsible about as they are leaders stable, lead a stable life. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Sorry, ini suaranya gede banget. Thank you for leader of opposition. I'd like to welcome the deputy prime minister to start your speech whenever you are ready. Please comment down.
Wait, aku ke toilet. Terus gitu. Bentar. Bentar.
Sorry, ini tadi di PM kemana ya? I didn't hear it clearly.
Toilet.
Okay.
I'm back. I'm audible, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Whenever you are.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. I'll start my speech in three, two, one. Let's kick all out of this debate because it is very irrelevant what they bring about, women want to be independent coverage, whatever, right? Because notice how the motion is talking about feminist movement, but they never explain to you why exactly feminists want to be, more capable than men. Because let me tell you, that these sort of notion can only happen because of women have this sort of specific notion about them, specific idea about what should we woman do, which is exactly this motion is trying to do. Because notice how the explanation of how their female leaders are humble and whatnot is because of assumption or anecdotes about female leadership, meaning that they are using the idea of female being in a leadership position are going to be humble, are going to be this, are going to be that, which is exactly what feminists doesn't want, which is exactly why feminists is created. It's just trying to fight these sort of notion. OO never explained to you why this notion is going to be better or why the stigma won't be that bad. Secondly, how so OO case completely false because their idea is based something that is not very unlikely to happen. And secondly, even if that is going to happen, I don't think it's going to be great anyway because they are vulnerable, because these sort of narrative is not that at the end of the day a feminist one. It's at the end of the day creating another misogyny. At the end of the day creating another image of what women should be. And I'm gonna explain to you why this is a very number one, narrative is very unnecessary. Secondly, how is it going to be toxic? And thirdly, why even if there's any sort of empowerment, why is going at the end of the day it's not going to be great. Firstly, why is it unnecessary? Notice how feminist movement right now is already progressing, meaning that there are notions that have been trying to be broken, even though that is not completely broken, or maybe the path is not very clear. As in this motion, considering that this progress is what exactly what we want, is to break any of the image that what women should be. It's the break image that the women should be something that is very normal, very human, meaning that no matter what you do, it's not because you're male or female, it's because you are as a human. This is what feminists at the end of the day wants, and feminists already progresses through these sort of ideals, creating same level wages, trying to create a safe place for women in order for them to actually have echo chamber and sort of help with their daily life, and we're trying to break these sort of idea. This is very unnecessary when you're trying to fight the same when you're trying to fight image. Why? Because you as a feminist movement, now you're having an affirmative action towards this sort of idea, towards another image, meaning that you as a group that fights for this image, just because the image is great, you're gonna force you're gonna support it just because it's good. But at the end of the day, this sort of image, it's exactly what imposes what women are going to do. That exactly are the society, what society at the end of the day wants. Meaning, not just coming from the society itself, but from the movement who are fighting the notion, fighting the idea at the end of the day. So what will happen in the future? Comparatively, in our side of the house, when we push out the notion of women are should be human, women should be equal, we creating the image of women are human too. Under their side of the house, they're gonna create another notion that women should be this, that women are should the characteristic of women should be this towards society. This is at the end of the day backlash, contradicts with our goal, contradicts with what how women should be treated, because they're gonna be treated in another way, and sure it's gonna be positive, but later on I'm gonna prove you why is it still not okay. This means that then comparatively in our side is going to be better, that progress in long term progress is going to be way much better, because you don't need to fight another narrative, you don't need to create any more sort of narrative. Understand that their benefit of, for instance, empowerment is gonna be short-lived. Because going to my second argument, why then empowerment are going to be better at the end of the day in our side of the house. Understand, when women are free of those images, they're free of, they're basically liberate. It's basically feminist movement trying to liberate these women without any sort of expectation. No longer their movement is, imposing the sort of idea that, when you're being a leader, you should be humble. When you're a leader, you should be this, that, or whatever. When in truth, whatever they're doing is, it's completely geared towards them. It's completely based on something that's not objective, or no, not objective toward their gender, but towards what they're doing exactly. What does this tells you? This tells you when feminist movements fails, or maybe women, the chances of when there's a failure, these are actors are gonna be attacked. Understand that when these vulnerable actors who are not capable, for instance, or who are different in the way of the leading, is going to be very much attacked by their own group, very much is not being represented as women, very much is being represented as something else. They're not women enough because they're not, because they don't fulfill the ideals of feminism, right? This at the end of the day is going to create conflict in our own feminist movement. This at the end of the day are going to depower the women who are not, are not up to our standard, right? Because the idea of the current status quo of feminist movement is gearing towards these women. It's fine to be whatever you are. It's fine to be, it's fine to be human, liking certain things, disliking certain things. This at the end of the day will give much more empowerment. Because why? Because it celebrates your identity. It celebrates who you are as a human. No longer identity, no longer is, have any notion about gender. This in long term will be better. It will prove that it will prove the stance of women being the same as men. Not, even if that all CEO trying to, portray the image of feminism is, we need this sort of empowerment at the end of the day. We say that there are no we give you the solution of there are other means of empowering, right? There are other means that, empowering, such as your identity or what you do, and whatnot. This at the end of the day, this is why that I think this is why that necessarily in our under our side the world is going to be way much better. And this ensure that there's going to be a much more fight, considering that we against the notion of the public, but it's going to be way more strategic in the long term, and way more better for women as a whole, and then the feminist movement as a whole. Thank you, that's all I can say.
Right. Thank you for Deputy Prime Minister. A reminder that POIs can be given via chat or via interruption. Right? Yeah. Let us continue. I would like to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to proceed with his speech. I think it was whenever you're ready.
Test. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, good. So I will begin my speech in one moment. Right then, in 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, it would seem that the opening government bench misunderstands what on who the expectations are going to be imposed upon. See, as the motion has stated, considering the context of the motion, we must understand that the coverage is it is the coverage of women in positions of power, specifically women in positions of power of countries that handle the pandemic quite well. So, ladies and gentlemen, this means that any and all expectations that are imposed upon women are in fact imposed upon women who are in positions of power, not necessarily to women or the feminist movement in general. You see, ladies and gentlemen, traditionally, men are often seen as figures who are as the only figure capable of holding position of power. However, that is also that is also something that feminists are trying to fight back against. That is the notion that only men are capable of power. And now we have quite an excellent opportunity to show that women are indeed just as capable as men, if not perhaps better, in handling the pandemic, as stated by the coverage itself. Now, yes, it's true that the coverage is indeed biased, but as my previous speaker has stated, that just because the coverage is biased doesn't mean what's being covered is not true. It is in fact factual. It is in fact factually true that countries led by women do handle the pandemic quite well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the the OG bench also stated that sorry, the OG bench has yet to address what we have proposed is that the idea of public order. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, yes, it's true that we have to understand the feminist we have to understand that as feminists we have to consider the long-term longevity of the movement. However, longevity or long-term considerations of the feminist movement is not useful or less urgent compared to the short term that is actually more pressing. That is because here's why, ladies and gentlemen. If we're not going to press the narrative that women are in fact that women can be just as competent as men are in terms of leadership, then there's going to be another narrative that could be pushed instead, that is of distrust. If we're not going to apply the fact that not to worry that there are leaders, our leaders are in charge and that they are very competent, then people are going to lose trust in the government and to an extent to women who hold position in power. You see, public order is of great importance, especially in times of crisis such as the current pandemic, because if people can believe that they are in good hands, then it doesn't really matter whether or not the coverage is biased, because after all, if we're really going to think in terms of long term, we also have to understand that that eventually the news cycle will eventually shift away from the current coverage into the future coverage of what we want the feminist movement to move towards. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're really going to think in terms of the feminist movement as a whole and how we're going to go in the long term, then we must also think in the short term. And we say that the short term urgency is that we must understand that by upplaying or by not directly opposing biased coverage, we would in fact give the feminist movement a better image. And in the long term, we don't even have to worry about that narrative sticking forever, because of course, as we all know, the news cycle will always continue on, and then eventually in the future we will have another narrative that we'll have to worry about. But that's something for the future. In the short term, however, this is what we have to think about, and as such, we believe that OO's concern of an unfair narrative is something that we don't have to worry about for now. And so, ladies and gentlemen, for that, we are proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you for Deputy Leader of Opposition. Proceeding to the closing section of this debate, I would like to welcome you.
Jo, sebenarnya di bawah 6 menit juga nggak apa-apa kan, asal daripada diperpanjang tapi ngulang-ngulang. Ya, sorry.
Okay. Right. Proceeding to the closing half of the debate, I would like to welcome the member of government. Whenever you are ready, please count it down and then you can.
Am I audible? Okay. It is so weird on opening opposition saying that they were actually trying to contextualizing the issue to a current pandemic situations, right? So it's actually worse though, because now women are only reliable when it comes to pandemic or crisis. You do not want that. You want people to judge women as a persons, and you want either way, what they say is an expectations, and that's why you want to counter that narrative. Responses towards opening oppositions. They say due to the positions these women sit in, which is the leadership, there will be a scrutiny over it. We say that this scrutiny is not reliable because it's work based on human judgments, right? This human judgment is bound to the narrative place in the society. We say the absence of counter narratives is bad. That makes this scrutiny wouldn't work, which is why as feminists, we should offer the counter narrative in order to ensure this scrutiny is working. And especially when they say this pandemic could induce fear in our society. Fear is a situation where people become less rational. This is why that there will be miscalculations when they choose a leader, for instance. When women are chosen as a leader during this pandemic, this will not based on optimal rationality of the society. Then there will be, especially there will be no long-term calculations made by the society, and this situation is harmful, especially leadership positions is not only last during the pandemic, it's going to last longer than that. And they also talk about empowerment. We say it's not mutually exclusive. In fact, what these narratives that they're trying to defend will actually discourage women to improve themselves, and which is why we are so proud to bring you our substantive goal. Our goal is pretty simple and similar to the opening governments, that we want women not to be judged by the perceptions, but to be judged as a persons, not to be put on certain boxes. Why it's important? Because it makes women feel as a persons. Because when you judge something, you're actually dehumanize that individuals. And this is what a feminist is trying to promote on, right? Which is why, okay. So what we're going to prove in our substantives, there are going to be three things. And it's more likely to prove that there are tangible harms caused by these narratives. Right? Number one, that we're going to prove this narrative will affect the feminism as a movement, women as a whole, and women as individuals. Why it's going to affect the feminism as a movement? Because this claim is not based on scientific proof, right? This is there is so many doubt on this claim. And I think when people talking about feminisms, people are associating feminists with, oh, they are too much relying on feeling, they're too much, they're not relying on evidence. This is something that we want to exclude from the society's mind, right? Because we want to prove that this movement is full with integrity, which is why the feminist movement should actively engage in discussions and counter these narratives, because we want to distance ourselves from the false narratives made by the mainstream media, which is why feminist movement should be more active on this. And moving on to how this will affect women as a whole. This will affect women as a whole because people are going to put expectations on women, right? So when women are putting on a certain position, especially as the leaders, it is not only a leader of the nations, but also leaders in your office. Then when these women are not able to meet the expectations of their boss, for instance, or the employers, then the blame will be not only to these individuals, but also to the women as a whole, because, oh, you're a woman, but you can't do this. So why did they say this and this? So this is going to be a judge, the whole women to be judged, not only the individuals, right? Okay. Okay. So what is the opposite? What is the alternative? The alternative, people can judge women based on their capability personally, right? Because this is important, because this is the last burden to the women themselves, because they just enjoy their working without any expectations or any extra burdens. And when they do job more effectively, they can have good performance. And this can be an empowerment towards the individual themselves, right? And this is how women can have the empowerment. And how this will affect women more into individuals, because when we break down the info slide, we saw that the woman will be judged to be a traditional excluded from traditional trappings of leaderships and become more accepting of science and more inclusive, right? I think that there are people also, for instance, are conservative in leadership, such as Margaret Thatcher. I think that this narrative really undermines the previous or the other female leaders that in the world, right? And we also neglect the fact that women could also be religious and sometimes cannot rely on science. And there are also women who want to work on their own without relying on others, right? So these claims are false, and it is going to be harmful to these individuals. Why so? Because these positive false characteristics by the mainstream media make the women to be closer to the progressive spectrums, right? So this is bad because if women who are conservative and want, for instance, to be elected as a leader, then they will not be chosen either way because, if these women get chosen, then the values will be all progressive. And I think when we're talking about a political career, we're relying much on electability, right? And in electability, there is what's so-called a basis voter, right? So this basis voter will coming from the conservative groups. However, when this narrative is played in the society, these conservative groups will never elect women. I think the huge progress in feminist movement nowadays is to change the perspective of conservative people. But these conservative people at the end of the day will elect the women. But that would be impossible under the word of opposition, right? Which is why I think the progress can only be happens under our word, which is why we are so proud to propose. Yeah.
Right, thank you for member of government. Let us continue with member of opposition. Whenever you are ready, please count it down. A reminder for everyone to check chat because people are POIing in chat. If you feel like your POI in chat is not effective as a speaker, please notify that if you would prefer to be interrupted in your speech. Ya, kalau memang merasa agak susah POI di chat as a speaker, if you like POIs just be given directly, please notify that before your speech. Ya.
Am I audible?
Yes.
I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, let's see that the world that opening government and oppositions and questions is much more likely not good, right? Because they're never even portraying or how then this shadow empowerment will happen. This debate should talk about two things. First of all, whether or not the strategy that feminists choose is good enough, for example, to empower women and create better engagement at the end of the day. But second, which proposal that could actually elevate the burden of women, for example, and develop themselves even further. We need to frame everything since the beginning, right? We think that the interest of feminists is equalizing women and men, right? We think both of them are human. Exactly, because men already have many presumptions that they can actually do anything on their own, that they're good in math or even anything or so stuff. As feminists, we need to utilize this because we are being oppressed thousands of times and it needs to be stopped, ladies and gentlemen. Feminists need to utilize these kinds of credits in order to make sure this society could actually understand that women are also capable. Women are also equalized to men in terms of capability and also things of that, right? Meaning what? Who make women can be seen as a normal human being is that closing oppositions. But why then opening oppositions could not win the debate? Because opening oppositions only trapped in the idea that it's going to create a better niche for the feminists. But second, it's only saying that it's a form of creating a stable or even peace conditions upon the pandemic era, for example, right? We think that this is not the relevant case and you need to forget opening oppositions about this. But beforehand, I need to engage to costing government, regardless that they are the same, giving the same nuance and never giving the extensions of how then feminists should not doing this, but let's rebut them anyway. They're trying to say is that women, that particular society is going to elect women, for example, later on, the moment there is the existence of elections. No, ladies and gentlemen, I think that every democratic society, the society also has the men, for example, what interest that they have or so on and so stuff. Therefore, they will not choose this person based on the media coverage, for example. They will choose based on what they actually need, right? But even if it is the case, we think that's totally fine because currently women have massive support, for example, coming from the society, knowing that women are very capable in doing the job or even the task to begin with, right? And hence they say that they will be very emotional in taking care of their job. We say to you, it's the benefit of being women because currently the moment you feel affected due to your heart, for example, this is the moment you're going to be very carefully in taking the decisions upon what things that you need to do or so on. So stuff you should not hurt your society or so on, right? Meaning what? The more good decisions only happen when we have women. But let's see, and all the rebuttals will be intertwined within my certainty. Why then? This is the exclusive strategy that we need to use. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to know that these assumptions exist in order to acknowledge women as a whole, right? We think that you are having the capability, for example, to do this, right? We say that this is the case of Jacinda Ardern, for example, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. The moment she was capable in solving the problems during the pandemic sessions, we think that the moment the media portray how successful you are due to this anecdote, we think that this is good because currently the society or the very conservative society will see that women are those people who are diverse in point of view. Or this explains to you how then this benefit is good. They can see which things or decisions that can benefit their country because they are able to hear the society's demand about that thing and that what things that need to be changed or so on and so stuff, right? We think that this is good because in a democratic country, in order to show that you are capable, in order to create a better participation inside of democracy, you need to have this, right? Meaning that this quality is exactly incentivize people to engage, right? That women could actually create betterment at the end of the day. But second of all, the second quality is also indeed needed, for example, because they are not going to be trapped in the last leadership. There's most likely toxic, for example. There's not going to benefiting at all, right? We think that this is good because what's going to be happen at the end of the day when we use this engagement, it creates a better discourse at the end of the day. We're countering the narrative that women aren't capable, that women are inferior, for example, that they could actually see that women could be a leader. Women have the qualities to begin with, right? But comparatively under yourselves, when the moment there's no coverage at all, there's no counter narrative, for example, that exists to help women, for example, who suffer, for example, when they live in a very conservative society, right? What's going to be happen under the essence of the house? Women will never be good, or even feminists will also be stuck at the end of the day. But how then these notions is what women need to have, right? Like Deputy Prime Minister try to bring within the debate, right? Because currently, you need to know that what's going to be happen, that the notions under the essence of the house, women is a weak actor to begin with, right? Women are not going to be able to be heard at the end of the day because you do not have the qualities to begin with, right? Because the bench that need to win within the debate is the bench that need to see that how then the discourse will going to empower women even further, to be heard, to be equalized by people. But no, I'm not going to take any POI. What then is going to be much more better under all sorts of the house in the sense of empowerment, right? Ladies and gentlemen, note this. Every company currently see women as unprofessional, for example. That hence women are hard, for example, to achieve higher positions like CEO. They need to track off many things. They should not be married or even they need to freeze their offering or so on and so stuff. We think that this is jeopardizing women. The moment there's the existence of narrative of qualities of women, that they can handle everything in crisis, for example, hence it will incentivize the company. That women is something that is very professional, hence it's going to be easier for women to begin with, to opt in into this kinds of thing. But this is practically good also for grounded society. Right? We think that the current assumptions will lead this conservative society to think that, hey, my daughter should go to college, for example, because she has the quality, for example. Because in the current situations, the narrative that always been portrayed that women only need to go to the kitchens, for example. But hence, the new narrative will say that women are having the capabilities to begin with. Women are good or so on and so stuff. Meaning what? There is the incentive. The people will have incentive, for example, to send their daughter to school or even to higher education system, right? Meaning, but under all sorts of the house, we are diminishing the stereotype that exists, right? Degrading this and making sure that women would able, for example, to go to those kinds of places that they want. For example, they have the liberty to do that, right? Because currently people will think that you have the same capability. The discourses exist in order to help us do two things. The reasons why housing oppositions need to win within the debate. We tell you the most exclusive benefit on how the women could actually get upon empowerment, on how then this will less likely to decrease the amount of stereotype that exists that women are not capable or so on and so stuff, or how that it will develop women in general. In saying that they can be able to go to company or even to go to education level, the second we need to win due to we are the one who tell you that the reasons why this is okay because men already do these kinds of things since a long time ago, and why the feminists should not utilize anything. We should utilize it to win. We propose.
Right, thank you for member of opposition to answer the question. I think yes, each speaker tadi maaf tadi nggak dari awal. If you would like, if you prefer to have the POI interrupted in voice, please state so before your speech. If you're unable to see chat, please state so. Karena I don't know if it bothers your connection or you actually prefer POIs to be stated in speech. Yeah. Right. Closing in the government side of the house, I would like to invite the government whip. Whenever you are ready, please notify and count, and we can start.
Is this audible?
Yes.
Okay, I prefer my POIs through voice. Thank you. I think what's very damaging in the opposition side of the house is the moment that they become very reliant towards the media situation, the media coverage, and therefore that is the only platform that they can do in order to gain discourse. We believe as closing governments, we don't think that's the opportunity to gain because there are other areas, sectors that we think that feminists would like to promote ideas through other platforms itself. Unlike opening governments, we think the practicalities in their side of the house don't clarify enough tangible harms that happens towards the feminist movement as women as a whole, and we think we're going to take that as exclusive in our side of the house. Before going on towards my framing, several responses towards the closing opposition itself. Understand that their claim is that they think that feminists needs to utilize this opportunity, especially that they understand that democratic countries that these women already have support from the very beginning. We think democratic countries vote stuff and so on. We think it's very reliant. For example, what my previous speaker I've told before is the electability when it comes to, for example, the majority or even needs with the public interest itself. We don't think it's going to be very reliant that, oh, because that you're a woman, we are going to vote for you. No, it does not work that way. Especially the moment that we're going to play under the media, which I'm going to exclusively frame this on how media interest is a very, very harmful thing when it comes to biasing in a political practice itself. Now, going on towards my framing, I'm going to start this framing into three aspects on how this political system works with the media itself, with the media coverage, especially with the feminists and women involved in this political system. And second of all is that how this feminist movement is going to be reacting and also its position itself. Going on towards my first framing, how is this going to be happening? Understand that in the info slide right now on how media coverage is exempling the portrayals of the leadership of the woman itself on how their achievement is done. We think first, we think this media coverage is only the basis the moment that these women have achievements, and we think that is the reason why that these expectations begin with. And second of all, we think in order for these women to start this leadership thing is always going to be tied with the political position explained by my previous speaker. And we say in order to gain that woman, to gain that political position, is through electability, is through the voices. And we think these voices matters from the very beginning. The moment that this woman portrays the idea, for example, the majority voices, stuff and so on, those things happens a lot in democratic countries, not because that women have support brought by closing opposition. Now, what's happening right now in current situation is that the media is excessively expressing these stories that women have this political position with their achievements current pandemic is that they have better executing pandemic responses. Several responses, judgment fallacy that happens towards this thing. First is that brought by OO, we think this is the reason why that they want to spread this influence. Think the problem right now with this spreading influence is that this spread of information is too much excessively glorifying, for example, the gender bias itself. Within the gender bias, for example, with approachable with the media coverage that is progressive, we think in order for them to have that information cycle to keep going on is for them to create bigger bias from the very beginning in comparison towards the men itself. We think this is too sexist and we think this is harming towards the expectation itself. And second of all, understand even if OO says that this is factually right, look again in the info slide or even towards the media coverage, we don't think that there is a criteria or even parameter that that assesses these performances itself. We just see on how much that they're progressing towards the thing. We think pandemic is very flexible in order on how these individuals are going to be contributing towards the country, and it's going to be very hard at the moment. This is not going to be that they do not collaborate from the very beginning. But third of all, we think it creates the huge standardization towards the woman in position, especially whether that woman is going to be elected or not, or this woman that is currently leading towards the countries. We say two scenarios. Women that is going to be currently leading the countries are going to have bigger burden from the very beginning. Several scenarios that's going to happen is that the reputation of that woman is going to be at stake. First, the political party that promotes the idea, that promotes that woman is going to be in that leadership program, in the leadership position, and also other women that is going to be that is going to apply, for example, these political parties. There's going to be higher expectations the moment that how your performance is going to be and stuff and so on. We think the moment that the reputation is at stake, that you do not fulfill these expectations, we think there's going to be lesser social support from the very beginning, especially, for example, when you're in conservative countries. These things happens mostly the moment that you're contradicting with the values, and we think this is very, very harmful towards the women itself, especially when it comes to the electability rate of women. We think there's going to be less trust in the future towards the women's stuff. It's going to be harming. So special cases is the moment that these women that are electing towards themselves, that they carry several values, for example, being conservative or even other values, being religious. It is going to be very hard from the very beginning because of societies does not have the same portrayal. This is because that they are very, very conservative, that they are fighting back against this bias, and we think this is going to be very harmful. As feminists, what are we going to do right now? We think what we are going to promote is we want to be judged by our stuff, our capabilities and stuff and so on. In order to do so is that we do not want to be boxed, because the current status quo with the media interest right now is that the moment that they approve, they show that the women that are achievable, that they have this merit itself, is that the moment that these women are creating greater standards. In order for you to be a woman, you need to have this criteria. You need to be humble, you need to be stuff and so on. It is going to be harder for these women to achieve, especially when they're carrying out other different values from the very beginning. And we think the scrutiny or even discussion from the society is going to be very, very lesser in their side of the house. Why? Because the gender boxes already exist. Second of all, is that the moment that gender bias exists and stuff and so on, we think the conservative ideas or even the sexist population is going to be very hard to be to ask with discussions with. In order to do so is for us to take away those barriers and parameters and open up doors, for example, to understand what woman really is. And in order for them to be judged by themselves is only through the characters, what they are capable to do, not only for the media coverage, especially interest. Right now from the media is for you to gain a lot of viewers, voters, stuff. And so we think media plays a huge role towards this thing. And we don't think as feminist staff, we do not want this coverage because it hampers bigger biases, and we need to struggle a lot more. It's going to be harder for us to engage discourses, and therefore feminists are going to fall behind. What we want from the very beginning, we want to take away this coverage, we want to erase this bias, and we think there's bigger opportunities for discourse and scrutiny on how people are going to embrace feminists, and therefore we think it is going to be better in CG side of the house. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Government Whip. To close the debate all together, I would like to invite the Opposition Whip. Whenever you are ready, count it down so we can start.
Am my voice audible?
Yes.
I prefer to PO, if you want to POI through chat. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Mr. and Madam Speaker, hundreds of years feminists fighting against equality, fighting against gender bias, till the time that now you have given a chance to utilize what you have on this coverage, you didn't use this chance. This is not good, because not only you wasting your time in finding another strategy, but also government side of the house is only relying on uncertain things. That this is never being, this strategy about this uncertainty is never being brought by government side of the house. Therefore, what you need to follow is CO proposal on how then with discuss of coverage you will create better empowerment and also discourse. We think that simple logic from me, that we think biggest questions for them is that how then men allow to have glorifications over their work while women under government side of the house are unable to do the same thing. We think that this is inequality. So therefore, we take the bullet as feminists. We should utilize this coverage to coverage into maximize potential clarifications towards government side of the house. Two reasons why government side of the house lose in the debate. First, they never engage on how in the moment you oppose this kind of coverage, women will be alleviate their conditions that they are somehow can living out from the out from patriarchy. This is never engaged on the side of the house. But second, they never engage to our exclusive case on how then this is the very exact way to feminists to acquire equality, because of how then we say this ways is only the way for you to gain equality. Two things for you today. First, which side will giving better discourse to feminists, but second class, which side could giving empowerment to feminists. All of my response will be intertwined in my speech. First, which side would giving better discourse to feminists? On government side of the house, they say discourse happen the moment you will be seen as normal. As a normal, that there is no such coverage. No, this course could not be happen the moment you seen as normal. Why? Because of how then the moment you seen as normal, it tells you that you are not giving any urgency. It tells you to the people that you as women is not important. That the moment you're not using any coverage, what portray for you as woman is only portrays that you are inferior. So therefore, under the side of the house, this course will be happen because of how then women sees unimportant, so women sees as inferior. So therefore, even if that discourse exists, actually, Madam Chairs, the discourse will exist is that how then it's validate on how then woman is very very weak. That it's validate that how then woman is really weak. So therefore, this is very bad for women to not to oppose these cases of coverage. So therefore, under the side of the house, the strategy to oppose these kinds of coverage will be failed because of how they under the government side of the house, they never rely on anything, which it is going to be hard for feminism because of how they're still craving for recognition and follower. This is so therefore under also of the house, this is very very good because of how then at least what can you do from this coverage? You could gain public awareness that through news every day telling about how good these women's leaders are. It could create sense of awareness that women could actually do the same thing as men, for example. But I think that second second issues, right? They said about how then this news, these assumptions is not proven. Within that context slide is actually already told you how then the journalists, medical expert, politicians tell these assumptions about how good women and gaining their positions. So therefore, we said that this is actually a fiat, that these assumptions, that this anecdote is something that is valid, is something that is true, Mr. and Madam Speaker, because of how then these people are actually credible enough, for example. So therefore, on the outside of the house, this sort could happen on how then you are actually, on how then you seen as people are actually able to sit in parliament. So therefore, this course exists. But second of all, talking about which side could give empowerment to feminists, the only response coming from government side of the house about empowerment is they said that the moment they feel not in pressure, you can empower this woman. We can see that pressure will exist on both sides, but let's compare which pressure is actually better. Let's see the pressure on the government side of the house. The pressure on the government side of the house will eventually still exist, Mr. and Madam Chairs, because of how then women in the current status quo, women are the one who should live in house, for example, the one who give birth to your children and taking care of them, to the one who obey your husband. So therefore, but what's worse is that they have no mechanisms to live on another option, for example. So therefore, they're still being trapped in this kind of patriarchal system. So therefore, under government side of the house, pressures will be harmful because of how then women didn't get any chance to block this kind of presumptions that men will always be good. So therefore, under the side of the house, there will be no counter narrative. Meanwhile, under outside of the house, the moment this kind of patriarchy pressure
is exists through this kind of coverage, through this kind of coverage, these women could actually fight for their about the presumptions of men, that somehow women are actually able to sit in parliament, that women are actually deserve to gain education. So therefore, under also of the house, the pressure exists is how then you need to pursue more education, for example. So therefore, this is, we think that this kind of pressure is very good to women, because this is something that makes women have an urge to live with a patriarchal system, that at the end of the day, the woman they pursue the education, this woman can actually thinking that they are already out from this kind of suffer, that this is only exists under CO. But why women in this debate? We think that the reasons why closing of positions is upper than opening of positions is because on how then the idea is only to the point where how then you should redeem pandemic panic, for example. We think that this is irrelevant, because of how then what we are talking about is whether or not you as feminists support or oppose this coverage, and also talking about this distrust to women and such, that we think it the betterment of this woman, the betterment of feminists is going to be done under CO, that somehow women need empowerment, and this empowerment is only exists through this kinds of corporate. So therefore, the outcome from collapsing of positions is these women are able to empower themselves and gaining a good education. But under the side of the house, under governing side of the house, they lose, because of how they under the side of the house, at the end, women will stuck in their home. The woman will living in patriarchy, because no one who gives us empowerment. That woman actually able to uplift themselves. So therefore, the mechanism only exists under also of the house. The true coverage empowerment will exist. Therefore, to best living for women, vote for CO.
Okay, thank you for opposition whip. That is it for this debate. Please leave the break room, but do not leave meeting. You can go back to the mass link where you have a lot of people there, because you are going to hear the announcement directly after this. For Levina, could you please help stop